Okay, so now we're gonna keep getting more detailed with these, okay? So although there are many normal curves, they all have properties in common. So that property, and you're probably pretty aware of it, it's often called the empirical rule. We won't be calling that here. So like the 68, 95, 99.7. So your curve is kind of cutting off where most of your data will lie, and that's between certain standard deviations. So in the normal distribution, your mean and standard deviation, you're approximately 68% of your observations will, if it's a normal distribution, then 68% of your observations will fall within one standard deviation of your mean. 95% of your observations will fall within two standard deviations of your mean, and 99.7% of your observations will fall within 3% of your mean. I guess I went fast through that. There's 95 to 2 standard deviations, and there's 99.7 for 3 standard deviations. Okay, so there's obviously a little bit more data that's on the outside. There we go. Okay. So something that we have to do often is sketching these normal distributions. So we'll talk more about like what I expect in a sketch. We'll do that in class when we go over our guided examples. But we'll just take a look kind of what they should look like. So the normal distribution of Iowa test of basic skills vocabulary scores for 7th grade students in Gary, Indiana is close to normal. So they're going to give you a distribution with a mean of 6.84 and a standard deviation of 1.55. So already from just that information, I know that it's normal. So I could set up a normal curve and I could set up its center at 6.84, and then I know its standard deviation is 1.55. So I'm going to keep adding 1.55 till I get 3 standard deviations away from my mean, and then I'm going to subtract 1.55 away from my away from my mean in the other direction. Okay, so just set up, it would look like this. Now, if I ask you for a percent or a proportion, it's the area underneath. It's the area underneath your curve. So you're looking at areas between certain standard deviations. So right now I'm looking for scores less than 3.74. So I'm going to locate 3.74 on my graph, and I'm going to okay, so what percent of ITBS vocab scores are less than 3.74? So in this graph you can see, okay, so in this graph you can see I shaded it in green, okay, but here's kind of where you're gonna use your empirical rule to kind of estimate where you think it would be, right? So here's one standard deviation, okay? So between here and here, you know that accounts for 68%, right? Here's 2 standard deviations, so there's 95%, okay? So then from here to here would be your 99.7%. So kind of as you subtract out, you know that, so your 68 cut in half would be 34 and 34, okay? Then you're left over with the 95 minus the 68, cut that in half, that would be about 13.5. 13.5. And then your 99.7 minus your 95 would leave you, and then divide by 2, would leave you with this tail end and this tail end being about 2.35. 2.35, okay? And then there's a little bit, obviously, more than that. So account for the extra pieces outside of the 99.7. So we'll estimate it at about 2.5. Ultimately, we're going to let our calculators give us these answers, but it's good for us to understand where they come from first. Okay, so what about now if I ask you for scores between? So now if I say between 5.29 and 9.94, okay, I understand that here's one Okay, here's 1 standard deviation away. So from here to here is 68%. Okay. From here to here would have been 95. You're going half of that. So the leftover there, that was 13.5. Oops. Okay. So then I'm just going to do the 68 plus the 13. Yeah, the 68 plus the 13.5 to get that. So I'll say about 81.5%. Like off on my, sorry. So we'll say about 81.5%, okay? So what I did is I took the 68% here and I added the 13.5 to it. So I know it had to have been less than 95 because 95 would have been that whole area there. Okay. So now I think you guys have some examples. Let's do a check your understanding that you have. I don't have it on my slides though. Okay. Okay, so it says the distribution of heights of young women aged 18 to 24 is, okay. Okay, so it's a normal distribution with a mean of 64.5 and a standard deviation of 2.5. Okay, so the first thing asks us to sketch a normal density curve for the distribution of the young women's heights, and we'll label 1, 2, and 3 standard deviations away from the mean. Okay, so it's a sketch, doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, that's good enough. Unimodal, symmetric. Here's my mean in the center at 64.5. Now I'm just going to add my standard deviation away. So first would be 67, 69.5, and 3 standard deviations away would be 72. Then I'm going to subtract. So 1 standard deviation away would be 62, 59.5. 3 standard deviations away would be 57. Okay, so what percent, then the next question is now going to say what percent of I'm just going to use this to keep. Okay, so what percent of young women have heights greater than 67%? So what we always have to do with our sketches is then shade the area that we're looking for. So I'm looking for 64, 67. I'm looking for this percent, okay? Anybody that lies over there. So now we understand that between here and here was your 68%, here and here was your 95, so then we split that leftover in half. So that's about 13.5 there, that's about 2.5 there. So that would be, yeah, I mean, that would be about 16, but you could say, if you wanted to use 2.35 to split it there, that's fine too. So we'll say it's about 16. What I mean there is that when you split the leftover, it's going to give you 2.35. So if you wanted to say about 15.85, that would be fine also. But eventually, we'll use our calculator. It'll be closer to 16. Okay. So I'm going to clone this again. let's look at that last question. So what percent of young women have heights between 62 and 72? So first thing we'll do is shade that area. Okay, so from 62 to 72, between here and here. Okay, so so then we have the 68% that's between here and here. So I got 68 plus the 13.5 plus the 2.5. 68 plus 13.5 plus the 2.5 is going to give me 84. So we'll say about 84% here. So 68 between one standard deviation, that's from here to here, 68, okay? Here was 13.5, and the remainder is 2.5. Okay, so we'll get into calculator skills in our next video.